To introduce Jesse Garrett is board member Kathy Williams.
I have the pleasure this evening to introduce Jesse Garrett, who is a trilingual young man who has found his passion with forensics by following in the footsteps of the next honoree. Jesse's mother was a civil rights attorney who instilled in him a drive for academic success, and he lived up to the expectations of his mother. With his Bachelor of Arts in International Relations under his belt, Jesse is one semester away from getting his master's in education and a bilingual certification from the University of San Francisco. After a few endeavors in consulting and working with youth, he found himself back in the forensic world and back in the classroom, and now is working as the assistant director of the speech and debate program at his alma mater, James Logan High School. And because of his numerous awards and trophies, having won them in many years of high school in the speech and debate team, I know myself well enough to know that I need to keep my introduction really, really short because there's no way that I'm going to be able to compete with someone who has the years of expertise in public speaking. So please welcome Jesse Garrett.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not going to tell you my name. My name's printed in the book. Please flip to that page and read my brief introduction to get a little bit better of an understanding of who I am. What I am going to start off by telling you today is about the nominee that I'm so glad won the award, and I'm here introducing tonight. Dr. Tommy Lindsey Jr. One of the things that really stand out to me about Mr. Lindsey, first and foremost, is that he was the only African-American male teacher I had in my entire high school career. Becoming trilingual was an endeavor. That endeavor took me to 2 different continents and took me to 5 different high schools in 4 years. So the power of that statement should not be lost upon you, that he was the first and only African-American male teacher that I had in my life. To say that that was an inspiration is truly an understatement. In 2009, my mother was diagnosed with terminal kidney cancer. I got a phone call on a Monday morning, about 9 a.m., telling me that I needed to come to Raleigh, North Carolina, as soon as I could. By that Saturday, I was in Raleigh with 1 bag of clothes, and I would spend the next 2.5 years of my life there. After my mother passed away, I stayed with my brother for 1.5 years, executing her estate, and it was at the behest of a good friend of mine, another one of Mr. Lindsey's former students, who asked me to be his best man, that I actually returned to California. This friend of mine is actually the director of forensics at City College, San Francisco. So his wedding, as you can imagine, was full of people who were just like us. Speech and debate coaches and competitors, and of course, Mr. Lindsey and his entourage. Now, while we coach students in the art of public speaking, one thing is tantamountly true for every one of those kids. There are 2 people in the world that can never watch them compete. First are their parents. Second are their coaches. And it's only when they make it to those final rounds and those final stages that you actually get to see them perform. So by this point, Mr. Lindsey had never actually seen me give an impromptu public speech. I was 31 years old. So I gave the speech, and it was, pretty decent, I think. My friend didn't complain. I wove in some Portuguese and some Spanish, and everyone was like, right? When I got done, I didn't look at my friend or his wife-to-be. I looked right at Mr. Lindsey, because that, for me, that moment was the final round he never got to see. And he looked at me, he didn't say anything, he just gave me that nod. That was the highlight of the wedding, to say the least. I know you're videotaping this, so I can never show this to my friend, but that was what it was for me. I say that jokingly now because in hindsight I can. At the time, it was probably the darkest point of my life, having just lost my mom to cancer. Mr. Lindsey came up to me and said, if you need anything, come on back to 408. At the moment, I didn't think too much about it, but I realized, I was really in a bad place and didn't have a lot of money, and forensics had always saved my life. Maybe it could again. So I went back. I took him up on that offer. I gave him a call. And without a reservation or a second thought, he gave me a job. Took me under his wing, put me in his office back in 408. His chair is much nicer than mine. But he believed in me in a way that he always had. And at that particular moment, I think he could see that it was all that I did have. And now, I am actually almost done with my master's degree and teaching credential from his alma mater, which I told him if I got into, which really wasn't that big of a deal, I would be attending. And in the letter of recommendation that I had him write, I'll never forget this. He has a signature introduction. I shouldn't be sharing this. He's got a signature introduction for all the letters of recommendation he does for students. And depending on how much he really likes you, the type of introduction you get. Of course, I got the best. But it was the final statement in that letter that totally blew me away. He put in there and he said, to the members of the acceptance committee at the University of San Francisco, Jesse is by far the most intelligent person I've ever met. And I'm taken aback by his capacity. You would be remiss not to accept him. His accolades are all written all in here. You know what he's done. For him to say that in my letter of recommendation, after giving me a job, putting me back when I had nothing, I'm at a loss for words right now to tell you what that really means. I think you know. I nominated him for this award knowing that it'd be more than just a check or a recognition dinner. It'd be a way for me to say, thank you. And I get to say that to him every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday when I show up for work. So, thank you, Dr. Lindsey. And without further ado, this microphone is now yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the board for selecting me. There are so many other teachers I feel are more worthy than I, but I do want to thank you very much for the consideration. Jesse, thank you for the nomination. I did offer a nod of approval only when you started to speak in Portuguese, of which I have no idea what the hell you were saying. I'd like to thank some very special people. First, a few of my cousins that are here, Sylvia and Reverend Barbara Smith and Reverend Jefferson, and also Loretta. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come up. I want to give a special, thank you to the matriarchy of our family, Gracie Jefferson. My parents died at a very, very young age, and she just kind of took us in, and she's still directing me as to what to do. I said something, and she said, just count your blessings and eat. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for always being Gracie. Okay. Then I'd like to thank Pam and Ed. You guys are very, very special. Many of you don't know of them, but if you were able to read their bios, it would just floor you. They've done so much across this country to get people to understand, social justice. And their fight and their crusade is something that's truly remarkable. Whenever I get an opportunity to say something, to speak, I always give a acknowledgement to one of my heroes. It's Dr. Asa Hilliard. And it's his philosophy that I try to live by. He said, I never encountered a kid who couldn't learn. It's just very simple. You love them, and then you teach them. It's very simple, but very hard to do. But Asa was an incredible human being and a very dear friend. I have been blessed to be able to do this for over 39 years. And my students know that when they travel with me, the class is never dismissed. And what I mean by that is when we travel through places like Chicago and the suburbs of Chicago, where Martin Luther King stated that of all the places in the South that he had traveled, the suburbs of Chicago were the ones that made him feel more fearful. That's when he was hit in the head with a brick. When we traveled to Atlanta to be able to visit Ebenezer Baptist Church after competition, and to visit and pay respect to the tombs of Coretta and Martin. When we have an opportunity to have Dr. Jones, who's at the Stanford Institute, to come in, he was a writer of Martin Luther King's speech, the I Have a Dream speech, and to talk to them about, the life of Dr. King and his life. When we get a chance to visit New York and compete, this is after competition, and visit the World Trade Center, class is never dismissed. And all I ask my students in return, I ask them to be sure to continue to use their voice as their drum until social equity becomes a rhythm of the land. Thank you for this honor.